Whether this memoir will turn out to be the world's longest suicide note, or instead the means by which I might elude the abyss, only time can tell. A precise interval of time, in fact, the 25 hours that stretch between the present moment, Sunday, October 28th, 1984, 11:06 a.m., and my presumed departure tomorrow on the noon shuttle to the airport. Right now, the other route by which I may exit this sterile Baltimore hotel, the balcony, is the more alluring. I need merely cross the room, slide back the glass door, step onto the terrace, and avail myself to the 100-foot drop to the parking lot. Appearances are deceiving. Just because you're reading my story, that doesn't mean I lost my nerve and took the shuttle bus. The proper inference may simply be that I slipped the manuscript into an envelope festooned with stamps and addressed to the Rachel Bishop Literary Agency in New York, then left the package outside my door along with a note asking the hotel management to pop it in the nearest mailbox. Are you reading this, Rachel? I love you, sweetheart. You're the greatest agent a has-been ever had. Assuming you find somebody who can decipher my handwriting, feel free to transcribe these pages, give them a title, The Day of the Lizard, perhaps, or Peasants with Torches, or Shambling Towards Hiroshima, and sell the thing to Doubleday for a big, fat advance, collecting your well-earned 10%. The balance should go to Darlene. Yes, Rachel, I believe you've finally gotten a bestseller out of me, and it arrives bearing the ultimate seal of authenticity, the author's notorious leap into oblivion, at once swan dive and swan song. True, the NSA may attempt to block publication, but when they go to make their case, the judge will laugh them out of court, especially when he hears about the giant fire-breathing bipedal iguanas.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omniviewer, and welcome to Kaiju Lit Circle, where the destruction of entire cities is just one page turn away. I am both a kaiju fan and a voracious reader, so it only stands to reason that I would have eventually come across kaiju literature. Oh yes, it exists, and this series is dedicated to examining it and making recommendations to you, the dear viewer. Today, we're going to start things off with Shambling Towards Hiroshima by James Morrow.
The plot follows Sims Thorley, a Boris Karloff-style actor who makes his living playing monsters in the golden age of Hollywood. It is his talent for shambling in monstrous fashion that gets him recruited by the United States military for a unique mission. Under Project Knickerbocker, the Navy is developing a new superweapon that will end World War II, a genetically engineered race of enormous fire-breathing reptilian monsters. Some ambassadors from Imperial Japan have been called to see a demonstration of the lizard's power, which would have involved a human-sized version attacking a model city, the logic being that such a demonstration will get the Japanese to surrender. The problem? The smaller lizards are inexplicably playful and harmless. That's where Sims Thorley comes in. As a man who plays monsters, he is the perfect choice to don a complex rubber costume and destroy the model city himself. Now he must give the most convincing performance of his career, as failure to impress the ambassadors will result in the real monsters being unleashed, which could result in the deaths of millions.
So as I'm sure you can imagine, there's a lot of metafiction at play here. This is a story in which the giant monsters are real, but it's still about an actor having to wear a rubber suit to play one of those monsters, as in classic Godzilla movies. The primary focus is on Thorley and his attempts to gear up for this role while keeping his career intact, and everything comes down to how well he is portrayed. And I'm happy to say, he's quite a great character. Sims Thorley is really refreshing to see. Read. You know what I mean.
Most stories of this ilk portray so-called monster actors in one of two ways. You either have the serious actor who was classically trained and hates being constantly typecast in schlock instead of making real art, or you have the 2-bit hack who's just in it for the attention and wouldn't know real art if it bit his nose off. The truth, however, is that most actors who make their livings as monsters, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr., Robert Englund, Ron Perlman, Doug Jones, Christopher Lee, and so on, are and were very talented actors who love their work and their fans.
Thorley, who as I said is most likely based on Karloff, embodies this perfectly. He is recognized by his peers for his incredible talent, and he even sees the value of his movies as art. Regardless of how campy they may occasionally turn out, he's darn proud of them.
Shambling's framing device sees a much older, far more melancholic Thorley writing his story as a memoir while he contemplates suicide after attending a convention. He is frequently interrupted by various people who are modern fans of his work, and yet again, we see a unique portrayal.
We all know what society thinks of nerds, right? Bunch of weirdos who obsess over the minor details of ridiculous, stupid things and then go online to post videos on YouTube about it. Bunch of losers. Oh, and none of them are women, because girls can't be nerds, that's ridiculous. It's another stereotype, of course. Shambling towards Hiroshima, however, portrays a wide variety of people who are fans and can even be described as nerds, but they embody all sorts of different types, just like in real life.
We get everything from delivery guys to call girls, all of whom know and love Thorley. One of the last to appear is a fan whose love of Gorgantis, a Godzilla-style franchise that Thorley co-created based on his experience, led him to become an anti-nuclear political activist, and he shares an especially poignant scene with our hero towards the end of the book.
Plot-wise, Shambling has a lot going on.
Thorley has a rivalry with a Bela Lugosi-type actor desperate to surpass him, is trying to get a revolutionary horror script produced, is in the middle of making the latest movie in a long-running Frankenstein-esque franchise, and on top of all of that, he's expected to end World War II by scaring Japan into surrender. It all culminates with a vivid description of his performance that I would love to see an actual suit actor comment on one day because it seems really accurate. It has all the passion and pain that goes into the art, and even if some details of the suit are fantasized, like how it can actually spit fire, anyone who has ever wondered what being a kaiju actor is like just needs to read this part at least.
In addition to that, we get cameos from all sorts of celebrities from the era, some of whom are even involved in Project Knickerbocker.
Although it does raise some questions. Like, if James Whale exists in this world, then wouldn't he have sued Thorley and his studio for ripping off Frankenstein?
Well, I guess it is possible to think too deeply about certain things.
Unfortunately, the one place where the book falters is with the monsters themselves. We are told that there are 3 lizards, named Dagwood, Dithers, and Blondie respectively, with more on the way, and they are introduced in a magnificent sequence worthy of the cinema. As if on cue, the 3 mountains trembled. They weren't mountains at all, stirring up blizzards of silt. Inch by massive inch, yard by formidable yard, they struggled to stand erect, achieving a fully upright posture just as the cages floated within their grasp. The creatures suggested quarter-mile-high tyrannosaurs, but modified for a marine environment. Pulsing gill slits, translucent swim fins, webbing between their talons like the veins of a Spanish fan, and retrofitted with fighting tusks, barbed horns, feelers as long as tentacles, and dorsal plates the size and proportion of fir trees. Their eyes glowed like signal beacons relaying calamitous news. Their tails were reptiles unto themselves, great undulating sea serpents arrayed in thrusting spines. Hundreds of razor-sharp teeth crammed their jaws, shimmering through the swirling murk like columns supporting a temple consecrated to some unspeakable Lovecraftian god.
Pretty cool, right? Well, after that, they proceed to do absolutely nothing. The threat that they will be unleashed is what drives the entire plot, but we never get to see the lizards in action. And that's a problem.
The one thing that all kaiju stories usually have in common is the destruction. For all the different genres and executions, at some point the kaiju gets to a city and wrecks it like a child ripping through a Lego set.
But the book never delivers on that front. We get to see some city destruction when Thorley dons the suit and wrecks the model city, but the actual lizards never get to do anything. It's a threat that's never made good on. And personally, I found that to be a tremendous letdown.
In fact, when the whole affair comes to a close, the lizards wind up getting poisoned and buried without doing anything, as Knickerbocker is spontaneously abandoned in favor of the Manhattan Project.
This is all kinds of perplexing to me because everything that happens in the book comes back to the lizards. It is made implicitly clear from the get-go that if the demonstration fails to scare Japan into surrender, the lizards will be unleashed.
Well, the demonstration fails to convince Japan to surrender, so the government puts the kibosh on Project Knickerbocker, kills the lizards off screen, and goes with the Manhattan Project instead.
What?
Why turn to something completely different if you already have 3 lizards ready to go? Morrow tries to hand-wave this by saying the Navy was embarrassed by how the ambassadors laughed at the demonstration, but it doesn't really hold up.
I kind of think that would have resulted in the lizards getting released anyway, with a sort of who's laughing now mentality behind it.
To have the promise of kaiju action that's never delivered feels like a wasted opportunity. Had I been writing this story, I would have had the lizards escape into the Pacific and start breeding, thus forcing the army to not only develop a new plan with the A-bomb, but also be on constant patrol to make sure the lizards don't cause any trouble after the war.
That would have played into the metaphorical aspect, with the lizards representing a threat lurking just out of sight throughout the duration of the Cold War and into the modern day. It would have been perfect.
I get that the story isn't really about the lizards, but it was still disappointing, and it's unfortunate when a kaiju story messes up its kaiju.
I know, review what you got, not what you wanted to get, but I had to get that off my chest.
With that in mind, though, Shambling Towards Hiroshima is still a fun read. It is a love letter to Kaiju Eiga that is more interested in the actual art of making it than being a proper entry, but that's not really a terrible thing.
It's smart, witty, poignant, just a little bit heart-wrenching, and even with the anticlimactic ending, I still say it's a book worth reading. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omniviewer signing off.
Just one last thing before we go. I feel an addendum is needed because ultimately Shambling Towards Hiroshima is about a man who's contemplating suicide, and the story is just this side of romanticizing it. I therefore feel I would be remiss if I did not include some manner of suicide prevention information somewhere in this video. If you're struggling with these thoughts, or you know someone who's struggling with these thoughts, this information is for you. Also, if you're struggling with these thoughts, I'm going to impart 3 simple words that I hear every Sunday morning at church. You are loved. I want you to really think about that, okay? Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.